I think FAIR has been the trendsetter and the industry standard for that.
Anand, so nice to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this. Anand, you've been, I can call you a thought leader, a pioneer in so many ways as a practitioner, as a security leader. You've seen what security programs of some very, very large companies like Target, like UnitedHealth looks like. At the same time, you've seen startups, you've seen young companies, and you've seen the difference in maturity, evolution of programs. We were talking about, some of your learnings. I'm very keen to know what a day in the life of Anand looks like as a CISO. We were talking about some investments that you said were big learnings, which you're not very proud of from an organization's investment of time and resources. Why don't you walk us through one such example of where you thought it was not the best use of time and resources of you and your organization while investing into that program or project around cybersecurity?
Absolutely. So the specific initiative that we are talking about here, Saket, is something that we did at one of my previous companies. If you remember, when the PCI and other compliance regimes came out, they required a certain data security baseline in the organizations. It was a requirement, so we had to deploy it in one of my previous setups, and it was a very, very large setup. So
how large? Just a range.
You are talking about roughly 300,000 people in the company. So it was that large. And
how much money did you spend? Just a ballpark.
Ballpark, you are looking at 10 million plus minus for deployment of this technology. Okay.
Yeah.
So this was early stages, and the problem with deployment of this technology was that first of all, you had to touch every system in the company. And in old organizations, you can imagine, sometimes not all the systems are even known, let alone touching every system in the company.
Yes.
Combine that with transactional systems, right? And you are talking about some of the most transactional systems in the world.
Wow.
Like more than Citibank, more than JP Morgan Chase, right?
Okay.
So this level of transactional systems. So you have to have extremely high caution about the performance impacts of deployment on something that affects that, right? Combine that with the issue that we had was that the technology required people to know what alerts to generate. So how would you know what alerts to generate? Because you are not an attacker's mindset, right? You don't know what kind of attack the attacker is going to perpetrate. So to know everything in advance is not possible. Consequently, in a rules-driven system like this, you cannot write all the rules in advance that a future attacker will use, right? So the combination of all of these factors was like high complexity, extremely delayed dips and slow deployment, inability to harvest benefit out of it so that you can be more protected, you can be better, in addition to meeting the checkbox of, yes, we met the checkbox of compliance, but in fundamental difference, that was not as much as we wanted it to be.
So where did things go wrong? You're talking about a huge project,
Yep.
touching almost every part of the company,
Yeah.
spending over $10 million. What went wrong, and what would be the big learning if you were to go back in the beginning?
I think what went wrong was that we should have taken a more risk-driven mindset to the technology selection and process, right? So to have a risk-driven mindset would have meant that we are looking at the kind of things that impact this organization and the kind of what the future evolution would be, right? What is happening in peer groups, companies, how the attackers are evolving, what is their level of interest, all those things, right? If you combine all of those things, one of the probably the obvious things in hindsight would have been that, yeah, we can do, rules are obviously an important part of any security system, but we also need to understand the deviation from the baseline of what the company is, the anomalous activity detection, right? That would have been probably a natural outcome of that risk analytics that we would have conducted. So that was a lessons learned, and that became a fundamental driver of how we do selections in the future, in my eyes.
We'll wrap up with one last, quick rapid fire round if that works for you.
Let's go for it.
And as I said, I'm interested to know a day in the life of Anand, a senior security leader. What does that look like? So one nugget for what you remember by meeting either the CEO or a board member of any of the companies you've been working with, and what did that conversation go like?
Yeah, so this is, I'll touch both angles of it, right? Early in my career and current in my career, right? Early in my career, I would go to some of these discussions, the board discussions or the CEO discussions, and we would talk about the technology and deployment and success, right? And I could see that the desire in those sessions was like, yeah, I have to listen to this, but I don't have to understand this kind of thinking and mindset on the table, right? Over time, you could notice from the body language that, yeah, they are going through the motions of this exercise, right? I started to finish my approach because I love conversations where there is mutual engagement, there is some stories going on, you could see the light in the eyes of the listener and all those things, right? So over time, I started to tweak my approach. I started to think like, what does it matter to them? In the end, what matters to them is, how is my business being driven as a result of the actions that Anand is taking? Sure. And I would say that's the primary differentiator between someone who is early in their career and someone who is later in their life cycle and have done a little bit of a rotation across different companies and understand how things happen, right? So that's kind of the ability to tell the story to the board and to the CEO. If you can master that, I think you have made it.
So early on you were more technical,
yeah,
and later on you actually said, how does that weave into a more cohesive story, yep, which aligns to what generally the listener wants to know or is expecting, yeah, and tell them and present them in their language. By the way, that's exactly what FAIR is. So last question for you, because FAIR is all about translating technical signals, technical, yep, jargons into a language that business can understand. You've been at the FAIR conference where we are shooting right now, Anand. Your quick summary of your first day experience at the FAIR conference and your views around FAIR, which was very difficult at some point with automation. How is that changing the industry?
Yeah, so I'm going to hit a few key points here. The first key point I want to hit here is that the quantification of risk. It's exciting to see the progress that is being made in that space, and I think FAIR has been the trendsetter and the industry standard for that. It continues to evolve, which should always be the case, okay? The second thing that I want to hit here is that this is the collection of individuals, speakers, participants. These are the people who are moving the industry. They are driving this future, hopefully more cyber-secure future of the country, right? So to be in this esteemed company, you automatically learn through osmosis and diffusion, right? So that's kind of my second key thing. The third key thing, my highlight particularly was to hear the conversation that you had with John Chambers and to get a sense of like how he is, as a non-security practitioner day to day, how he is thinking about the kind of information that he wants to hear from the CISOs and the security executives, right? Which is a reinforcement of what we discussed a little bit earlier. So those are my three key takeaways. I think I would just do the horizontal on this, which is that what FAIR will lead to is automation, and that automation takes the some of the complexity and the rigor of managing security in or risk in today's world.
Got it. Yeah. Anand, this has been super insightful. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and insights. I know that a lot will be learned from people listening to this conversation. Thank you so much.
I certainly hope so.